afternoon, Lake Orion. Welcome to History Now here on ONTV. I'm your host, Anthony Taormina, and I want to talk to you guys today about, ladies and gentlemen, I drove by the palace not too long ago, and I happened to have flashbacks. And I remember back in the day where, as a child, I would go with my father, with my brother, to watch hockey games, in particular the Detroit Vipers, team from the International Hockey League. And I thought, it'd be a great idea for people to remember the history of the Detroit Vipers, at least from my perspective. So today we're going to talk about the Detroit Vipers. The Detroit Vipers was a franchise that existed from 1994 until 2001, when the organization and also the league, the International Hockey League, a hockey league that has been in existence since 1945, both ceased to exist by 2001. At the time, the Detroit Vipers were an organization that moved from Salt Lake City to Detroit. At that time, they were the Salt Lake Golden Eagles. The IHL at that time was expanding into other markets. They originally were started in the Detroit area, around the Detroit and the Cleveland area and the Flint area. And it expanded from Cleveland, Chicago, Indianapolis, Minnesota, and eventually got as far south as San Antonio and as far west as Los Angeles. So it became a nationwide league, in the most part of a regional league. So you could make the argument at that time that the IHL was declining. I tend to disagree, as does many other Michiganders, whom at that time they had two International Hockey League teams, the Michigan Kalamazoo Wings and the Detroit Vipers. I'm going to talk about the Detroit Vipers because at that time, the Vipers were actually sold to Bill Davison, the late Bill Davison, who was also the former owner of the Detroit Pistons. At that time in 1994, the NHL was going through a situation called the lockout. They were locked out of their season, so as a result, several NHL players ended up playing for the IHL. A notable player that played was Peter Bondra, who was a star player at the time for the Washington Capitals, pre-Alexander Ovechkin. Peter Bondra was a great hockey player. He was truly a champion hockey player and truly a great player. At that time, the IHL was experiencing a rise, and there had some organizations in that league. The Fort Wayne Comets, Fort Wayne, they were a team. They existed from 1952. The Kalamazoo Wings, Michigan K-Wings, as I mentioned earlier, also at one point was affiliated with the Dallas Stars. They existed from 1974, and their team is still competing in present, only in the AHL. And then also the Milwaukee Admirals, who existed in 1977. So, the IHL had their fair share of teams that were, one, regional, but also two, that had long existing histories. The Vipers at the time, in 1994, was coached by Rick Dudley. Rick Dudley was the head coach from the 1994-95 season, but also halfway through the 95-96 season. At that time, the Vipers finished second place in the NHL Eastern Conference, or in the IHL Eastern Conference, excuse me. Why am I saying NHL? But they didn't have an NHL affiliate at the time. The reason why I talk about NHL affiliates is because a lot of times the IHL would be seen as a feeder to a NHL team, such as as I mentioned, the Michigan K-Wings used to be an affiliate of the Dallas Stars. So in many ways, teams will tend to use their colors. Like with Michigan, they tended to use the Dallas Stars green, gold, and black. So then connection with the Stars. The Vipers didn't have any didn't have an NHL affiliate until 97 and 98, in which I will talk about later. Anyways, the Vipers, as I said, in 94, their expansion year was second in the NHL, to the Kansas City Blades. They ended up losing to the Blades in the first round of the IHL playoffs. But at the same time, the future was bright for the Vipers, and they ended up having a very successful season. They led the IHL in attendance, which was quite remarkable at that time because you'd usually have like a couple hundred. Palace was selling out hockey games like crazy. Now, the reason why they were doing that was because you look at, okay, in Detroit, the Red Wings play at Joe Louis Arena. That's in the city. That's, sometimes it's very hard to get down there too. There's a lot of people that go there. Also, tickets are very expensive to go to a Wings game. So, if you look at the IHL, yes, the Vipers are playing alongside the Pistons at the Palace, but also they were playing alongside the Detroit Neon /the Detroit Safari, and then later on, also the Detroit Shock. So the Vipers were sharing the arena with other teams. However, their ticket prices were pretty low. Were pretty cheap compared to other teams, particularly the Pistons, but also the Wings. So for fans, especially in the suburbs, like I'm talking about Lake Orion, Clarkston, Oxford, Troy, Rochester, Pontiac, Auburn Hills, that area, it was very good to, and you get to see a very good team, get to see a very, very good team. It's an expansion team. It felt like it was your team. It felt like it was your own team having that chance to go and watch your own team play. Now, as I said, they led the IHL in attendance, especially that first year. It would continue to expand in 1995 and 1996. At that time, they realigned the divisions. They had a team called the Atlanta Knights move to Quebec. They had other organizations like the Los Angeles Ice Dogs became the Long Beach Ice Dogs. You still had the K-Wings. You still had other teams like the Cincinnati Cyclones, the Cleveland Lumberjacks, the Indianapolis Ice, and also the expansion Orlando Solar Bears. In 1995 and 1996, midway through the season, Rick Dudley left to work in the front offices of the Ottawa Senators, who would later become the affiliate of the Detroit Vipers. And replacing him was a coach named Steve Ludzik. Steve Ludzik was at that time an assistant to Rick Dudley, and for the most part followed a lot of Rick Dudley's principles. And still, the Vipers were a very good team. They led the IHL in attendance. Once again, they were second place in 95 and 96. And if you look at it, fans were getting excited. Fans were excited about the Vipers. And eventually players would be encouraged to come to Detroit. And I'm going to speak about that when we come back to History Now here on ONTV.
We own a Habitat home.
I love working on my Habitat home.
Soy dueño de una casa de Habitat.
My neighbor is a Habitat homeowner.
Being a Habitat homeowner has changed our lives.
My mortgage payment for Habitat is less than what I paid for rent.
Habitat for Humanity of Oakland County currently has homes available with mortgage payments lower than most rent payments. If you or someone you know needs decent and affordable housing, call 248-338-1843 or visit our website at habitatoakland.org.
Welcome back to History Now here on ONTV. I'm your host, Anthony Taormina. Talking about the Detroit Vipers here. Talking about the 95-96 year, but also the 96-97 years where the Vipers were growing, and growing. Not just in attendance, but quality players were coming in to the Detroit Vipers. Among them included players like Stan Drulia. Stan Drulli, who will eventually become assistant captain. Peter Savaglia, who was the captain for the team. Dan Kessa kind of was the equivalent to what Darren McCarty was on the Red Wings. Kevin Weeks, who was the goalie for the Vipers. Rich Perrant, another player for the Vipers. Also, a phenom, a freshman phenom in the name of Sergei Samsonov. Samsonov would eventually go on to do great things in the NHL later on, but Sergei Samsonov at the time was a rookie. But also you had the legendary Gordie Howe. Gordie Howe ended up, was it seen as a publicity stunt? Yeah, but at the same time, it was a good chance to get Gordie Howe to be the first player to play in 5 decades in an IHL ice. I remember that game very well because my dad took me and Sam to that game, and my dad was going crazy. He was chanting, "Gordie, Gordie, Gordie." It was just, the atmosphere was just so exciting, so fun to be a part of. And you look at the Vipers was at that time at the peak. By the time of the 97-98 season, they were growing from 94-95, 95-96, 96-97. They were growing until into the 97-98 season, in which the Vipers were able to finally go over the hump, which was overcoming and getting into the Turner Cup finals. The Turner Cup is kind of the equivalent to what the Stanley Cup is. The Turner Cup it's a smaller cup than the Stanley Cup, but still it's a very, very memorable cup because, as I said, the IHL was formed in 1945. The Turner Cup came in about the 1950s, 1960s. So the Turner Cup, like the Stanley Cup, was pretty old in itself. The Vipers ended up going through rivals like the Michigan K-Wings, the Indianapolis Ice, the Cincinnati Cyclones. They still had to deal with their arch nemesis, the Orlando Solar Bears. Also, this expansion team called the Grand Rapids Griffins was coming in. A lot of those names ring a bell. And a lot of why those teams ring a bell is because so many of those teams play in the AHL as well. So, but the Vipers ended up making the Turner Cup finals against the Long Beach Ice Dogs. And the Vipers ended up winning that series in 5 games, and they won the Turner Cup championship, winning at home in front of their fans. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful feeling to have that chance to actually be at that game, the game that they clinched it, the game that they won. And, to see the Vipers celebrate the Turner Cup in front of their fans was just totally, truly, truly remarkable. The Vipers at that point, even though the IHL was slowly but surely going downhill, but I felt at that point, the 97-98, maybe the IHL was at the best point of its life, I would say. As far as Michigander fans, as far as, you have the Vipers were winning the Turner Cup, you had the Red Wings were winning the Stanley Cup, you had the in the NHL you had that, and you had the Vipers winning it, you've had these good teams that are consistent. You had Indianapolis Ice, the Cleveland Lumberjacks, Chicago Wolves, the Ice Dogs, Long Beach Ice Dogs, Las Vegas Thunder, the Michigan K-Wings, Grand Rapids Griffins. I mean, it was a very good time to be a hockey fan in the state of Michigan at that point during the 97-98 campaign. And I mean, if you looked at, if you didn't have any money to go to a Red Wing game, or because Red Wing tickets were very expensive, hey, go to the IHL. And at the same time, for someone like myself who I took an interest in learning about the IHL, I took an interest in, taking a chance at the, because, hey, I always looked forward to the Detroit Vipers, as did many people, as did many other people throughout the state. And it was truly an exciting time. Steve Ludzik was being nominated for Coach of the Year in the IHL. You had Sergei Samsonov winning Rookie of the Year in the IHL. And the Vipers were just a true established, hardworking, blue-collared, they didn't go out of their way to, impress. They played the game, and they played the game the right way. At that time, and I made mention of this briefly, the Vipers were affiliated with the Ottawa Senators. As I said, Rick Dudley moved on to become the coach of moved on to work in the Ottawa Senators front offices. So some players were slowly but surely going to the Ottawa Senators, but it wasn't to the extent as we will get to in a little bit where, there was a decision by the front offices of the Palace, particularly Bill Davison, to go with a certain organization we'll go over later. But at that time, business was booming for the Vipers. Even if the IHL was going down somewhat, the business was booming for the Vipers. I mean, fans were coming out. As I said, the IHL, or the Vipers once again led the IHL in attendance. They were able to do that for 4 and eventually 5 years in a row. It was truly an exciting time to be a Vipers fan. Now, the colors of the Vipers. Somebody made mention to it early on. The logo itself was that of a snake cradling around a hockey puck, with a stick as well. But their colors were actually eggplant purple, but also it was eggplant and white. So, so they had plenty of colors, but their main color for the most part was eggplant. A lot of times you would think with a team that's the Vipers, the colors would be green, but it wasn't. It was mostly eggplant. So that was very, very unique at that time as well. So you look at business was booming. Everything was so high in Detroit, especially in the suburbs in Auburn Hills. What could make between from 97-98, which was the height of the Vipers were at their height, the Turner Cup champions. They were gunning for it, then they were defending the Turner Cup title in 98-99 to going down in 2001. I'm going to talk about that in our third segment of History Now here on ONTV. Hello, Lake Orion and Oakland County. This is Anthony Taormina here, talking a new show here called OA Now. We're going to talk about sports from football to basketball to volleyball to track and field to soccer, cross country, etc. here on OA Now on ONTV. Welcome back to History Now here on ONTV. I'm your host, Anthony Taormina. I want to make a brief correction really quick. The Vipers colors were also eggplant, but also aqua and red. So I forgot some other colors about it. Anyways, I want to make that correction very clear. I want to talk about now the 98-99 season, arguably seen as the Vipers' last good season before the decline. 98-99, there in the front offices, Bill Davison at that time was wanting to own his own NHL team. In 94, Bill Davison wanted just an outright hockey team. Well, in 99, he wanted to have a NHL team to himself, and he found one in the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the Tampa Bay Lightning was arguably the worst NHL team at that time. So if you look at naturally, if you're taking a team that's struggling with like the Lightning was, and you're having a good team like the Detroit Vipers, what are you going to naturally do? You're going to take players from the Vipers, whether they're unprepared or whether they're prepared or not, and move them up to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, 98-99, the Vipers made the Turner Cup Finals again, defending their championship, but lost in 7 games to the Chicago Wolves. The Chicago Wolves ended up winning the Turner Cup Championship, and it kind of resembled the end of an era in sorts for the Vipers, because as the Vipers associated themselves with the Lightning, the Vipers themselves struggled. Attendance also started to fall. Several teams, attendance, your Vipers started to lose fans. You started to lose money. The attendance, as I said, fell. The Vipers, it wasn't just the Vipers that was struggling. The entire IHL, as I mentioned throughout the program, was struggling to exist because they had expanded so much out of the focal base, which was in the Michigan area, and they ended up expanding throughout the country. They couldn't afford to have that. They couldn't afford to have that national exposure. And they kept losing money and kept losing money. Teams started folding. Several teams ended up leaving, especially the regional teams started leaving, and then the other teams started ceasing to exist. So in 2001, following the 2000-2001 season, the Vipers in the IHL, both organizations ceased to exist. It was truly a dark day. But at that time, people stopped caring about the Vipers, and it was unfortunate because the Vipers were struggling. The Vipers were not as good as they used to be. All their good players ended up moving up the Lightning. Steve Ludzik, who was coaching, ended up being reassigned to coach the Lightning, and it was just a complete mess for the Vipers and for the Vipers organization. What's the legacy for the Vipers? Why do we still remember them today? It felt like it was our own hockey team. It felt like that, as someone that lives in the suburbs of Detroit, whether it be in Lake Orion, Clarkson, Oxford, Troy, Rochester, Auburn Hills, Pontiac, West Bloomfield, Bloomfield Hills, it truly felt like the Vipers were our own team. They played at the Palace, which is right up the street from here. They truly felt like it was, it was a big talk in the schools. It was a big talk in the, you wanted to do research on the IHL, and when the IHL ceased to exist, when people stopped caring after the 98-99 season, when the Vipers associated themselves with Tampa Bay, it just wasn't the team they were used to associating themselves with. It felt like an extension of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and at that point, the Lightning was not a very good team, and all those connections you used to have with the Vipers were gone. But the Vipers are still remembered because of the hard work, the dedication, truly cared about the fans. You look at the rivalries that they were able to have in the IHL, the Orlando Solar Bears, the Cincinnati Cyclones, Indianapolis Ice, Michigan K-Wings, Fort Wayne Comets, Grand Rapids Griffins. I mean, as a whole, the declining years of the IHL might have brought the best times in the state of Michigan. They might have been the best times, because without the IHL, there would be no Detroit Vipers. And you see a lot of those teams in the AHL, you see a lot of those teams in the AHL, they wouldn't have existed without the AHL. Now, there have been several attempts to restore the Vipers name and the Vipers legacy, including the Michigan Vipers. But it's not like what the Detroit Vipers used to be. I mean, it felt like there have been several attempts to restore the IHL name. There is another IHL organization currently out there. Obviously, it's not like the old IHL, but the legacy is, you see somebody wearing the eggplant, the aqua, and the red, you should throw a big smile on your face, because that team brought a whole community together, brought multiple communities together. Yeah, you could say the Pistons did, you say the Red Wings did, but really, it was the Vipers. And the Vipers are still truly fondly talked today in a positive light. I encourage you guys to research the IHL and to research the Detroit Vipers. You have an experience for sure. I would truly recommend it. The IHL is truly a great league, and the Detroit Vipers were truly a great team. All right, I'm heading off for History Now. I'm your host, Anthony Taormina. Have a great night. And Lake Orion, see you soon.